Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Family Business Podcast. I am absolutely delighted to be joined by two colleagues today. Firstly, by Martin Stepek and also by Alec Broadhurst. So, for regular listeners of the Family Business Podcast, you may be familiar with Martin. I first recorded an episode with him I think 7 or 8 years ago, and then more recently, the topic of today's conversation in the Mindful Family Business and the work that we did together there. And Alec, I do believe this may be your first formal appearance on the show, so it'd be great to tell the audience a little bit about who we are and what we're doing. I'll just set the tone a little bit by saying it's been a while, firstly, since we released any episodes of the podcast. And that has been because behind the scenes we've been working on something very exciting, which we're going to be talking a little bit about today. And it links very much to a series of podcasts that Martin and I recorded together, as I say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago now that we actually recorded them. And that was the Mindful Family Business. And we're going to be talking to you a bit about why we're bringing that back to the sort of fore in this conversation. But perhaps before we do, for those that may not be familiar, may not be regular listeners, this may be the first time you've listened to this podcast altogether, could we just go around the room and give a brief introduction, a little bit of background and history? And Martin, I'll put you on the spot and start with you if that's okay, and then Alec, and then I can introduce myself a little bit as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Russ, and thank you to anyone who's listening just now. I'll cut a long story short. I was born into a family business. I tried my best not to join the family business, and to the extent that I did a law degree and then worked my way around the world for 4 years. But still, the emotional draw came, and I became a director and a co-owner of the family business for probably about 20 years or so. Family business then went into administration, and by that time I'd studied for 5 years what was the new subject of family business dynamics at Glasgow Caledonian University, and I found it fascinating because it started to tell me an awful lot about the emotional challenges that I found personally and my siblings found. So on the back of that, I co-created the Scottish Family Business Association as a charity to help family businesses in Scotland. And that was very successful for many years. I brought on board a lot of the universities and some of the professional bodies to look at the subject of family business more deeply. And I've been then carrying on helping family businesses in that time. And I was fortunate enough to meet Russ very early on in his podcasting career, I think. And we just hit it off. And I think it's because we shared the reasons and the purpose for helping family businesses, which is it's about the people, it's about the individuals, and it's about their collective nature as a family. To be honest, I'm not overly concerned about what widgets you might sell or what services you might provide, but I am concerned about how happy you are, and that's really where I come from.
Fantastic. And Alec, over to you.
Well, I haven't known you guys quite as long as you've known each other, but I've worked in my own family business, and probably 2 or 3 years ago, I think I met you. Russ was introduced to you via FB UK, Family Business UK, and I was at a period of time when I was working in my family business, but just wanting to explore what else was kind of out there and thinking about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to do it, and I kind of had no idea. And I think you sensed that when I was talking to you, Russ, because you advised me to talk to Martin, and that was a really great help for me because I talked to Martin over a number of months just about purpose, about family business, which up to that point I worked in a family business, but I didn't know it was a field of study or anything like that. So that was really interesting. Martin also introduced me to mindfulness, which I also didn't know anything about, and I found it really interesting and really liked his ethos and the way he looked at it. So spoke to him for a while, and sort of then Russ, got reintroduced, and I started working with you in the Family Business Partnership, sort of shadowing you on your engagements with families to really understand more about the work that you did. At the same time, took the FFI accreditation, and now we work together kind of on a daily basis. And you also very kindly let me in on the collaboration that you were having with Martin in thinking about how you took Mindful Family Business a lot further. So that's kind of where I've got to today.
Yeah, fantastic. And for listeners who, again, this may be the first time that people, there is a back catalogue of around 170 episodes that I started back in 2017 with the intention of it being weekly. Now, I don't know how many weeks have passed since 2017, but it's a lot more than 170. So it tells you how well I've done at making this a weekly podcast. But the intention behind the podcast has always been to provide useful, informative information and guidance to families who are in business together. And I actually launched it at a time where my career was more focused on financial planning and wealth management, typically working with family businesses and family-owned enterprises, and working on that kind of topic of succession or transition planning or retirement planning, as it was called in the financial planning field. Soon became very clear that my future didn't lie in telling people how great pensions were. Because despite how great pensions and investments are, I found it far more interesting to explore with families the dynamics, the kind of systems element of what was happening for them. Launching the podcast was part of that experience, and now I own and run the Family Business Partnership, which we are all a part of. So that's a little bit of a brief background as to how we've all come to be here in this virtual studio on this sunny day in the beginning of June. But actually, if we just rewind back a little bit, Martin, to the time we decided to record a different podcast, it was a separate podcast to the main Family Business podcast, although the listeners would have heard both. But the Mindful Family Business came as a result of the discussions that we were having on a regular basis. You were very gracious in helping me to understand, as you did with Alec, the role that mindfulness can play in our lives, but not in a kind of a dictatorial way or a pushy way. It was out of curiosity from our side and a willingness for you to share from your perspective. But the more we were speaking about this, and we were meeting regularly, probably on a weekly basis for 5, 6, 7, 8 years maybe, we just got to the point where it was like, why are we not telling more people about this? Which was the motivation behind the Mindful Family Business. And we're at a point now where we're looking to launch a new program for people to access that takes some of that teaching into an online course that people can either be guided through with our support or can go through off their own back and their own steam, have access to all the modules and exercises along with that. But I wonder if we go right the way back to the beginning in terms of how you found mindfulness, the value that it's had in terms of your life, and particularly at the time when you did come across it. And then again, I think if Alec and I can share our reflections after that on how we came to it, because we're much later in that process. You're, I think, 25 years in, so it'd be great to kind of understand how you first came across it and the impact it's had on your life.
Okay, thanks very much, Ross. It goes back a long way, probably 1998. I was finding working in the family business mixed feelings, I think, at best. The joys and the woes. The joys were we had an amazing culture. We had a really, really warm-hearted culture, dynamic, but fun. But at the other hand, I felt stressed. Stressed in two ways. Stressed because somewhere deep inside I thought, I'm not really doing what I want to be doing. And the other part was, I'm working, whether as owners or co-employees, with my 9 siblings, and my mum and dad were still kind of there or thereabouts in the business, or even if not in the business, then anytime you went to visit them, they talked about it and had opinions. So I was finding this incredibly stressful, and I'd never experienced stress before. This is me in my late 30s, coming towards 40 years old. And so I started looking for things that could help you with stress. I've always been kind of intellectually curious, so I'd studied all the time management books, all the leadership books, done every course in the world that ever was anything to do with my career, and none of them helped me in that regard. And so by chance, by coincidence, and I do believe in coincidences, my wife and I and our 2 kids, who were just very young at the time, went to Broadhurst bookshop in Glasgow in Buchanan Street, which was sadly missed now. I mean, it was a gorgeous shop, 6 floors of books. And to show where my stress and my stupidity was at the time, I was looking at IT books. Something called the internet was apparently about to become something relatively big. I was looking at it thinking, could we create something called a web shop or something like that? And so I was looking at that, and I was going on holiday, and I was going to bring these business books with me on holiday. So out the corner of my eye, I saw a kind of burgundy kind of coloured thing, and it was a pop-up for promoting a book. And it was the Dalai Lama with an American psychologist, and they were discussing, in the book, they were discussing science and Buddhism and mindfulness, which I'd never heard of. And I was totally cynical about this. And I looked at it and thought, oh God, it's rubbish. But it was called The Art of Happiness. And I didn't have the art of happiness in me at the time. I had the art of becoming really stressed. I was a genius at becoming stressed and irritated and cynical and jaded. So I picked it up and I thought, well, looked at the blurb at the back. I think it's going to be absolute rubbish. It's something to read. I'll learn a little bit about Buddhism, which I knew nothing about. And then I'll put it into a charity shop and forget about it. And then I started reading it, and I bought another book that was kind of similar to it, so that I could have 2 books that I could dismiss unduly. And then I started reading it, and it was very modern science. And I've always had an inkling towards, if you're going to trust anything, trust science. And so I was looking at this stuff and thinking, this is really interesting. I'd never looked at neuroscience before, or sort of psychology, looking at the happiness of beings. And I found it was remarkably interesting. And then there was a couple of chapters about how to do meditation. And I thought, oh God, meditation. Here we go. This is when it gets really rubbish and nerdy and stupid. And I started trying to do it. And I found even learning it from a book immediately helpful. And I think it's that idea, and all 3 of us have experienced this loads of times since, but even just sitting down and closing your eyes is a good start. Sitting down, closing your eyes and noticing your breath helps, brings you sort of greater peace of mind. And then your mind starts wandering because the mind is manic. But if you look at it from an intellectual point of view, you start seeing, oh, this is actually interesting. My mind's doing this all by itself. And so you learn from that. And so I started practicing mindfulness and went to a Tibetan Buddhist group because there were no secular groups around at the time. 18 months after I first picked up the book. And I was very wary of that. And when I started doing it, when I was led in the practice by the teacher there, I found it astonishingly helpful. So I started studying with that group for a long time. And after 6 years, they asked me to become a teacher of mindfulness. And mindfulness is just one of the teachings that the Buddha taught. The Buddha, I just want to say this to get it out of the way, the Buddha was not a founder of a religion in any way that we possibly could consider it. A religion came as a result of his teachings, but he was just trying to teach people how to be happy, or rather, he was trying to teach people how not to be miserable. And that was an astonishing insight for me. And so I practiced it and qualified as a teacher. And then I was then studying it with the secular people and have been teaching it ever since. So that's kind of where I was coming from this with mindfulness. It's essentially self-survival, if you like, and also survival of my family, because you're not really a good person when you come home physically and mentally shattered and not wanting to speak to your kids or your family because you're too tired. So that's where I was coming.
Yeah, and Alex, similar question to you in terms of, you mentioned about the introduction to Martin, and at that time the introduction wasn't made through the lens of the way that Martin can use mindfulness to help us better understand ourselves. But give us a kind of overview of your journey today in terms of mindfulness.
Yeah, so I think when I was in the family business but not knowing what I wanted to do next, what I wanted was some sort of careers advice or someone to tell me what to do, I think. So when I thought, talk to Martin, that would be really great, but I didn't know what to expect. And he started talking about mindfulness, and I was a bit like, why are we talking about this? Give me some careers advice, tell me what to do. tell me what I should do next. And I think that approach, although at the beginning was quite sort of unusual or odd, it paid dividend in the long run. That he was talking about the way you think about things, your mind, your purpose, and these kind of underlying elements that can really support you in making decisions and understanding yourself. And actually, found that it was a real building block to kind of firstly take away clutter around, God, what am I going to do? Going in lots of different directions, and taking that pause and having that ability and giving yourself the time and space to think about something. So that really helped me at that stage in my life. And then it was a case of learning more, understanding more, and just wanting to continue it, try and practice, even though I'm very bad, practice mindfulness, think mindfully in situations, and just have that breath for thought and consideration around those kind of different decisions and different elements of your life. So that's kind of where I came into it, and I found it a great help at the time, and really realised that it can be a huge help to other people as well. And that's where I've come to in discussions with yourself, Russ, and Martin.
Can I just come in a second?
Yeah.
Alec said, even though I'm really bad at practicing, everybody's bad at practicing. That's why you need to practice, And it's not that you get perfect at it. You're bad at it, and then you get less bad at it and less bad at it. Because this is a lifelong practice. Yeah, be excused, Alec.
Okay.
And I think, so to bring it into the context of the program that we're going to be offering as well, in terms of my own experience, we were introduced, Martin, by our friend and colleague Murray Mickle, who you knew from your work with Scottish Family Business Association and various other elements. And I knew because she was kind enough to offer to mentor me through my own FFI accreditation. And when she suggested we talk about mindfulness, I had a lot of misconceptions in my mind as to what that was. And I'm generally a curious person. I think that would be one of my character traits, is curiosity. So I was really curious to actually understand more about what it is that I thought mindfulness was. And to my mind, I could see the value and the benefit in spending time taking a breath and being more aware of your sort of surroundings and being more present. It made sense at a certain level in that sense, but it wasn't something that on its own that drew me in. And so having that conversation with you, as we did back in, I think 2018, it may have been, which obviously that internet thing took off because it allowed us to be able to speak back in 18. But by understanding a little bit more about what it was that was actually taught and understood from Buddha, really made it come alive for me, because it just made sense. And we're talking about something that was originally taught 2,500 years ago, that if somebody came along now and said, here's this set of teachings, everyone would think was an absolute genius as to how to navigate the modern world with all of its distractions and stress and the kind of the more kind of immediacy of current lifestyles compared to what I imagine would have been the lifestyle 2,500 years ago. And that to me is where the depth of understanding around what mindfulness was really came alive for me. And I wonder whether a good place to start now, in terms of looking at where we're going with the path, which is the name of the program, is just to give an overview, Martin, of things like the Four Noble Truths and a glimpse into the kind of Eightfold Path. We cover that in the Mindful Family Business. We go into depth on that, so we don't need to do that necessarily today. But it'd be good just to give people who may not be overly familiar with it a kind of whistle-stop tour, if that's possible, without doing it a disservice.
Okay, no problem. One thing I would say, just as a sort of preview, is people have a tendency to think that long ago nobody was intelligent, or that long ago nobody could possibly think like we think. But there's this period 2,500 years ago, it's called the Axial Age. And we've got certain periods in human history like we would think the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Age of Enlightenment as the biggies. But 2,500 years ago, it's a bit like your favourite football team or your best football team of all time. Socrates, no pun intended, he was a footballer as well. Aristotle, Plato, Confucius, Buddha were all living at the same time. I mean, that's a pretty sizable chunk of brilliance and wisdom. So this whole thing was people were starting to think about how do you live your life and why do we suffer? And you're starting to look at not just like astronomy and science, but also what's going on in the brain. And the way that Buddha did it, according to the myths, and obviously 2,500 years ago, nothing written down for hundreds of years. So you need to take it with a pinch of salt. But basically, as a young guy, young, well-off, noble sort of guy, started seeing the suffering that human beings go through, aging, sickness, death, etc. And he went out and tried to teach from the people of his time, the best teachers of his time. And that included some sort of meditative practices. The story goes that he nearly starved himself to death because somebody came up with a really good idea that if you don't eat, you'll get enlightened, and he figured out very quickly that if you don't eat, you die of starvation. So he gave that one up. So eventually, though, he was frustrated because he couldn't find something that worked or something that worked sufficiently for him. So one day, the legend goes that he sat down in a village that he was walking in and sat down with his back to a tree and said, right, okay. And he didn't do this in a Scottish accent, and I paraphrase him, so don't take this as literal. He sat down and he thought, I'm just going to sit down and notice my mind and what it does until I can really understand it, or else I'm going to go back to the palace and give up this sort of holy spiritual crap and just give it all up. So that's what he did, and the story goes that he started seeing his mind coming up with all the stuff that we do, our minds do all the time, which is, oh, you're tired, just give that up, or remember you need to buy shopping tomorrow, or I've got that at the weekend. All these things kept popping up, and the insight was he kind of almost like took himself away from it and thought, I'm looking at my own mind having these thoughts. Now, in neuroscientific terms, that would be like the amygdala is producing stuff automatically, not chosen by the person whose brain it is. And there's another part of the brain, prefrontal cortex, neocortex, other areas, that are saying, look at this person's mind. So it's almost like we have these two very different versions of ourselves in the brain. And he clicked that way. Now, he obviously didn't know those parts of the brain and things like that. But he gained the insight that you could separate out your thoughts and your reactions and your feelings from the observation of them. And if you observe it and you notice it's unhealthy, you can take your mind away from it. Not by suppressing it, but just by flicking a switch. So you get angry at something, then you breathe in, breathe out, which just calms the mind down. What's the point in getting angry? Do you want a cup of coffee? Now, he wouldn't have said a cup of coffee, of course, in those days. He would have said something about Indian tea, probably. Let's all have a cup of tea and just calm down. Boom. Argument over, row stopped, and his mind is better. So that's what he was doing 2,500 years ago. He eventually, either he or his followers after his death, kind of formulated it. And so the Four Noble Truths, which really means the four truths that make you a better person. First one is that life is full of problems. The human mind seems to not be easily satisfied. We're frustrated, we're dissatisfied, we get annoyed easily, and we get down easily. So he said, understand that. Understand that that's what's up here in your brain. A brain and a mind that produces feelings that you don't want. And that's an amazing insight to have. And this is all, I'll go off on a lecture here, but this should all be taught in schools, that you've got this amazing thing that can go haywire. So the second truth was then says, and it's made worse by your own reactions, your own grasping. You want things in life and you don't want certain things in life. And what's life do to you? It's so unfair because it stops you getting things that you want in life. and it keeps producing things that you don't want in life, like rain in Scotland when you want a sunny day, things like that. It's saying there's lots of things that make you irritated, and it's coming from the brain, but you wanting things to go your own way, which is a very egotistical mindset, says it just makes things worse. The third then truth that he said is you can learn to control this. You can learn to stop this just by noticing the mind arising, gently disengaging with it and putting your mind somewhere else, somewhere wiser, somewhere more constructive. And the fourth truth is, hey, but to get that way, you've got to do a lot of work. You can't just change your mind, a mind that's evolved over millions of years. You can't just change it overnight. And so that then leads on to what he called, or somebody called, the Eightfold Path, which is 8 aspects of living that will help you get to this controlled mind that is peaceful and happy. And those 8 are right understanding, or correct understanding, or skillful understanding. And that's what I've just described: the suffering, the way the mind makes it worse, and the fact that you can deal with it. So it starts again with that. And then it says, right, what's your thoughts and what's your intentions at any given moment? You need to get them right. You need to get them, skillfully notice them, so that your states of mind and your thoughts are going to help you in life rather than hinder you in life. And he says, so you need to work on noticing your thoughts, which is, we'll come to mindfulness in a second. But notice your thoughts and make sure your thoughts aren't going to cause you any harm, and try not to make them cause anybody else any harm. And if you can make them cause people good, so much the better. So it's common sense in a way, but hard work. Then there's aspects that come from our mind, other aspects, which is speech or communication. We all think, but quite often we state things without thinking. So you just blurt something out, and it's unskillful, it's unhelpful, it's embarrassing, or it's problematic. And so he says, try and notice what the mind is about to produce as words, whether that's written down or spoken. So I should be mindful here, trying to make sure that my speech just now is mindful, it's thoughtful. So try and control the communication side to make it, as constructive and helpful as possible. Then is action. What do you do? What decisions do you actually make? They also have an impact on you, and they have an impact on people around you. So think in terms of skilled action. You see this in skilled negotiations and skilled facilitation. There are people who are they're aware that what they do can affect other people, and therefore making decisions like going to war or not going to war, or ending a war, or ending an argument in a family business requires skill in terms of seeing what the decisions and what the consequences are. Then they're all interesting, but the most interesting in terms of modernity is, he said, be skillful in terms of your career. Be skillful and thoughtful and wise in terms of your employment, what you do as paid work. You should try not to harm yourself, paid work. You should try not to harm other things in paid work. You should try and make sure that the work you do, or the company you own, or he even extended it to kingdoms, the kingdoms you run, or the countries that you're prime minister or president of, try and think about these things and make decisions then that are for the greater good. Now, a whole raft of philosophers in Europe and in America followed from that almost 2,000 years later, more than 2,000 years later, but so insightful. And then the last 3 are more about states of mind themselves. You have to try hard at this. It's not going to come naturally. It's right effort, and that's back to Alec's point about, so I'm not good at practicing. It's hard work. The Buddha said you're swimming against the tide doing this all the time. The mind is wanting to be automatic and reactive, and you're trying to make it gentle and controlled and constructive. This is right effort. You need to work hard at this. But if you overwork, then you get exhausted, and that will set you back. So it's balanced. Mindfulness comes next. And mindfulness is noticing what's going on. The mind is not really good at noticing what's going on in terms of a slow, thoughtful response. It wants to react fast, and usually its reactions are over the top, inappropriate and unhelpful. So we're saying develop the ability to notice what's going on moment by moment by moment. Just get better at it. Don't seek perfection, but just get better at it. And the last one is skillful concentration and focus. If you want to get something done in your life, you better be able to keep your mind on it, because the mind is, and in fact, these things don't help. I mean, you've got everything human beings have ever invented, discovered, thought about, and all the worst things possible in the human mind, all in there. And if you're not able to say that B, I want to focus on this, you'll get nothing done. Or not nothing done, you'll get much less done. The last point, before I pass back to you, is my thought about this, because I'm interested in literature, is see if Shakespeare was around in the 21st century, he wouldn't have created 30-odd plays. He'd maybe get around to 6. Why? Because he'd be watching the Champions League final instead of writing a play. He'd be looking to see how many people liked his last play on Facebook, He'd be seeing people criticise him on LinkedIn, using all this fancy Renaissance words, And it's true. You cannot get done half of what you want to do in life if your mind keeps getting distracted. So that's it. Learning how to focus. Back to you guys.
That was brilliant. That was great.
Yeah. The thing I find really helpful with this, and again, it's kind of what's inspired, firstly, the podcast series we did before, which we are going to be re-releasing. So we're re-releasing the podcast series, The Mindful Family Business, be under the Family Business Podcast banner, so listeners don't have to go and find it anywhere. It'll be dropped into your feeds as you go. So if you're not already subscribed, do that and you'll get those delivered to you. But when we were talking through those various elements that make up the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, is the value of understanding the translation that is often used. So you spoke about it at the beginning around right communication as an example. That's not a moral judgment of right or wrong. What we're talking about is noticing and being skillful with your communication as is necessary for the situation that you may be in. And that's where, for me, the desire to do more to help people to find this as if I'm not doing it a disservice, a tool to be able to be utilized whilst they're in business with their family, really help. Because if you take the Four Noble Truths, okay, you've got life's tough, that there is the inevitability of suffering. You move that into a family business scenario, and you could argue there is an inevitability that because of the complexity that comes with balancing the various different hats and roles and responsibilities and the complexity that comes with being in business with family, will bring with it challenges and inevitable suffering. So you take the second noble truth and go that mostly those are created by our own needs and wants. Again, you put that into a family scenario, and if there are differing needs and wants and priorities and focuses because life is different for everybody just by way of nature, then you can see that it's present there. Third noble truth, there is a way to navigate this, but it is hard work. It's the same, and I think what we're trying to do and trying to bring to people by introducing the path is to give them the tools and the stepping stone to be able to go from beyond the theoretical element of this is good. We are all drinking from or drinking the Kool-Aid. I can't remember the exact phraseology that is where we've taken our own medicine here. We practice this on a regular basis. We meet every week to practice together, to be guided through it, because we understand the value and the benefit of having this as part of our lives. And the path is a way of bringing the ability to introduce this into your own life without it being necessary to do what Martin did and read a book and then dive into this world for 25 years. That's certainly an option afterwards, and I'm sure Martin would be very happy to support people in that. But I think that, for me, brings everything that we've been talking about already around the work we do with family businesses. There's complexity, there are challenges, there are competing interests, there are different viewpoints, different perspectives. There is perhaps a lower level of barrier in communicating amongst families than you would in a non-family business, for example. So if your boss asks you to do something, you might tell them to go away if that boss is also a family member, whereas in a non-family business, you might go home and go, God, my boss has asked me to do some stuff I don't really want to do. That's harder if it's a family member because you're going home with them. So this complexity exists, and there's this amazing toolkit that exists to help people navigate it. And the path is kind of building the bridge between those two worlds. And I'm really excited to bring it to people because I think it's something that will have a genuinely positive impact. And Martin, you shared that that internet thing may have been a good thing to go into, again, in hindsight. But actually, you discovering that book in the Borders bookshop transformed your life. And what I hope we're doing and by bringing this to people who are listening is that ability, again, to help transform lives. And I don't know whether either of you want to speak to the impact it's had on your own lives in terms of, Alec, you and I are perhaps earlier in our journeys on that, excuse the pun, that path. But we understand the impact that it has. We understand the impact that it brings to families who cultivate these skill set and use these tools. But do you want to speak a little bit more to how that's impacted you personally? You've got no excuse in terms of the practice side because it's always the practice. So Martin's given us a green light on that one. Yeah, that's you, Alec.
It's interesting going back to the Mindfulness in Family Business podcast. I think just I'm going to swerve the question a little bit. One observation I have about it is what Martin was talking about is that change is hard. And when a family business wants to change something, it's really hard not to just do the things you've automatically always done or revert back once changing for a month or 2 months and reverting back to kind of the norm. And that's as a family business advisor, you want to support change, and you can do that with sharing the knowledge, but also thinking about the mindset to do that. So try to override, really difficult thing to do, override the automatic responses you have for things, be thoughtful about decisions, be kind of understanding of other people, I think can help you achieve that. And I think that's the thing that's really interesting for me. It's something that sits as a kind of almost beneath the surface of maybe the knowledge that you need to do something or the business skills that you have. It's something that can really stay with you and support you with anything in life as you go forward.
Yeah, I'd like to come on to that. The mindfulness isn't a magic trick, and what we are teaching in the path is not a magic trick. And it doesn't tell you the answers. You have to work out the answers yourself. But it's easier and more likely that you'll work out the best answer if you have a mind that can think softly, slowly, and clearly, and if you have family members around you who can do the same. Now, I had the mixed fortune of living and working with a group of 10 of us plus 2 parents. So just by chance, the numbers then give you so much more opportunity to experience different ways. Some of my siblings are quiet and quite passive. Other ones are more excitable and reactive. And you start to see that, and I include myself in the latter, that you start to see that it's your evolved, genetically given brain that's actually driving all your reactions to things. And that's just it's almost like a lucky dip, whether you come out with a good solution. If you've got just a bunch of people reacting all the time, and that goes for succession, bringing somebody into the business, whether somebody should join the business, somebody should get promoted, when to pass shares, who to give the shares to, all this stuff. And you're coming in with just preconceived ideas and characteristics and mindsets that you've never actually looked at. It's a bit like, I don't know, there are 5 tools in a shed and you decide to pick up a hoe to mow the grass. It doesn't work that way. You have to choose the right tool for the right task. And what mindfulness does is it helps you review your mind. It helps you review how your mind works, what it currently produces, and helps you try and make it produce something better. And that's an astonishing help. But just like with good family business advisors and consultants, they're not there to tell you the answers, because they can't tell you the answers. It's your business, it's your life, and it's your family. You have to work it out, but we can help you learn how to better control the mind so that each of you is better able to explore these issues, these complex issues, and come to your own conclusions. It doesn't mean that every family in the same situation would come to the same conclusions, because that can still vary from person to person. But your ability to think and contribute and to listen is enhanced exponentially.
Yeah, I think that there's kind of three pillars that are described in some of the teachings as well around ethical conduct, mental discipline, and the development of wisdom. And if we kind of shrink that down to one word, it's kind of behavior, mindset, and knowledge, essentially. What we're aiming to do with the path is to help you develop each of those areas around mindset, around behavior, and what you might need to know in order to help you better thrive in business together as a family. Now, that could be one of you going through the program and taking that and being better able to face the complexities of being in business with your family as a result. It could be all of you as a family going through it, which would probably have more impactful results as a result of that. But I think in terms of the applicability of teachings from such a long time ago to the modern day, the fit, and we may be biased because it's the world we're living in, but the fit between what is taught within this and how that, when it's understood and cultivated and continually worked on, can help improve decision making. It can help reduce tensions. It can help create a greater level of coherency amongst a family unit as a result. I think it's a really powerful. We've got the best of both worlds in terms of this modern thing called the internet, that we're able to speak to each other on and communicate this course, and tying that into something that is stood the test of time and is scientifically backed in terms of the impact of thinking mindfully and being aware, is a perfect time for us to be able to bring this to people, to allow them to cultivate and develop their wisdom.
I think that it's a fortunate coincidence, and again, it's just, I think, luck, that I was finding mindfulness and the original teachings around it at a time when I was stressed in the family business, and at the same time I was studying family business dynamics at Glasgow Cali for 6 years while I was the director of the company. So those three things were influencing me at the same time, and that then helped me instinctively and out of personal need, urgent need, to try and interpret these original teachings in a way that helped me in my life. And because my life happened to be in a family business at the time, I was thinking about how does this work in a family business? And I think that was maybe like 20 years earlier than you and I first met. And when we started discussing it, then it's only retrospectively you start to realise that's how it was being formed. An ordinary person in an ordinary situation picking up the Dalai Lama book or any book about Buddhism isn't going to start to translate it into how does this apply in a family business setting. So that was just luck. But I think it's been good fortune, because every scenario that different people go through requires a different interpretation of these original teachings. That's why they start off with sort of seeming spiritual and all that side of things, because that's, in those days, people were really suffering in life and were looking for a sort of lifelong answer. Whereas I think nowadays it's much more, I've got a life to lead, how do I lead it? And I think that's where the Mindful Family Business as a podcast was exploring this connection between these teachings and this complex thing we call a family business. And now we're at the stage of saying, well, we've actually created a course for this, not for any particular great commercial reason originally, just because we know that this is the way that you can help people. And we can't be teaching them all the time, but so people have produced it so that people can help themselves and they can get facilitated conversations as well.
Yeah, and I think part of, again, around the language, it's a course and it's based online, and as Martin said, you can go through a self-guided version or you can go through a guided version which is facilitated. But what we're not doing is getting to the end of that course and then giving you a certificate and going, there you go, you're now mindful, off you go, you don't need to do any more. What we're doing is getting you to a point where hopefully you understand and have the tools to be able to adopt this for the rest of your lives, so that it can have a truly long-lasting impact in terms of ways in which to understand your thinking and how your mind might work. And to have that as an opportunity for the three of us coming together, as we described right at the beginning of this recording, that it's by luck and by chance that we happen to have all come together at this point in our lives and in our careers, that we're able to do something that hopefully will have that long-lasting impact and effect on many people down the line. So I'm very grateful for the luck of the universe in terms of delivering us to the same place at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah. So your plan is to re-release the episodes. How many episodes were there of the original?
So there was a preview and then 10. So we won't do the preview again.
No.
That
right.
one we'll hold back. But the previous episodes that go through in depth the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path will be re-released in very quick succession, so people can do a deep dive on that. I think it's worth pointing out that the course isn't those podcast episodes but placed online. The course itself is based over 8 modules, and within those modules there are videos and reflections and exercises to take away, to learn and embed the teachings that are within that. And just to give people a kind of a sneak peek of what those modules are based on, there are some that are based on how do we go about building resilience, how do we go about managing change and uncertainty, how do we go about dealing with stress and anxiety? So all of these elements we're taking and putting into these modules that people, as I say, can take either at their own pace through the self-guided, or they can work with us on a weekly basis with a cohort of people who are in family business and work through each of those modules together as a group. And we're really excited to be bringing it to everybody. And the first thing is, if you want to deep dive on the Mindful Family Business, they are being re-released, but it's not a prerequisite to join in the course as well. There's no entry exam to get onto the course itself. So you can do both or either in that sense.
And if it's resonated with people today, is it just best to get in touch with you, Russ, in the first instance and have a conversation?
The Family Business Partnership website is going to host all the kind of logins and portals for people to access the course. So that's familybusinesspartnership.com. I have to just say that when I came up with the business name, I hadn't considered, rather foolishly, how long a domain name that would then make my email address and the web address. But familybusinesspartnership.com is the place to go and find out more information. If people do want to get in touch directly, they can reach out and find any of us on LinkedIn, and we'll put the links on the show notes. And if anyone does want additional conversation or further conversation about it, you can email me as well at russ@familybusinesspartnership.com, and one of the three of us will then come and speak to you. And I hope that when it is released, that people can really delve into it and enhance their experience of being in business with their family. And I don't know whether either of you have got closing thoughts or reflections you want to leave our audience with before we bid them farewell.
The only thing I thought, just as you were saying that, was I wish we had that 30 years ago when we were all studying family business, things in our family business. The ability, I lost my parents in 2012, 3 weeks apart, and we had good relations with our parents, but they could have been better. And I think had we as a family explored these subjects that we cover in the path and in the family business partnership, and in the family business partnership and in the mindful family business, we could have gleaned information, reactions, emotions. We could have been so much closer, and we could have had the courage to explore issues in a confident manner because we knew we wouldn't be reactive. And I think that to me is the thing. And I hope me, my wife, and our 2 children, we will be able to do that conversation all through our life because we're more skilled to do it now. And we'll make better decisions.
Sounds like a good place to end on.
Yeah. Thank you both. Pleasure as always. Martin, you and I have both been told over the years that we have good voices to fall asleep to. So I hope by having the addition of Alec in, unless he's got a similarly tuned voice, that people have got to this point in the podcast without nodding off. So it's been great speaking to you both, and look forward to bringing the audience out there more from us as a collective as we move forward.
Great.
Cheers.
Thanks very much. Take care, everybody.